One of the problems with innovation is we make it too complicated. We turn it into something that only people with high degrees and lots of consultancy experience can play around with. I like talking about innovations with anyone, a child, a street vendor, a shoe salesman, a teacher. And I think that if we make innovation something a little less romanticized and kind of too glamorized, we can actually all become better people and better innovators.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Engatica interview series. I'm your host, Kimberly, and we're really glad to have you join us today. We have with us a very special guest. We have Alf Rehn, the Professor of Innovation, Design and Management at the Faculty of Engineering, University of Southern Denmark. Welcome to the show, Alf. It's so nice to have this conversation with you today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Before we dive into this crazy interview and a set of questions that we already have prepared for Alf, let me tell you something about the Engatica series. The Engatica interview series is a powerhouse of insights from industry experts and influencers from around the world, a platform that provides latest news on AI, innovation, and technologies that will help you grow your business. Come be a part of our community where we learn, share, and grow together. Well, diving into my first question for you, Alf, is how can we help understand the process of innovation?
Well, that's something that I could speak about for hours and hours, because of course innovation is a huge question, and it's this big desirous thing that we all want to become better at. When I start working with companies on their innovation processes, I sort of always have to start by reminding them there is no one size fits all. We often dream that there would be this kind of perfect process, often created by an American and published by Harvard Business School Press. But in fact, when you look at how innovation actually works in organizations, you have to understand context and culture before all other things. It all starts, of course, from ideas. Companies think that ideas are tricky and difficult, but actually what I've seen in my work, both my research and my more kind of consulting style work, is that every company I've worked with has been filled with ideas, absolutely brimming with ideas. But they can also be filled with processes and people that are very good at killing ideas. The boss who doesn't want to listen unless it's one of his or her personal favorites coming up with the idea, the people who don't want to listen to young people or don't want to listen to old people. So already there, we have to kind of understand that innovation can work very differently in different organizations, depending on the foundations of culture that exists in there. When we then go on from trying to realize ideas, we come into a different problem. Now it might not be so much about psychological safety or who gets to speak, who gets to do, but much more about, okay, so how do we actually allocate resources? How do we make sure that people have the time and the money and other resources to realize something? So, for instance, right now, I'm working with one of the most successful companies in the world. I can't name their names because I have an NDA with them, but it is a household name, big in India as well, and exists on basically almost every country on the planet, excluding Russia and North Korea. They have more money than God. They have a desire to innovate. They really want to have these things, and they have a lovely culture. They're really delightful to work with. The one thing they don't have is time. They're simply so successful and so pressured and simply can't hire fast enough that anyone really would have time to set aside, to daydream, to really work on something, to create that first clumsy prototype, to kind of experiment and so on. So here, in that second level of innovation, you might have completely different problems. Some companies might lack the time. Some might lack the money. Others might lack kind of the desire in people to test things out. Then a third stage at some point comes on when we have realized and just kind of showed both proof of concept, but now must prove that this can actually be turned into something that succeeds and can be produced en masse, we sometimes say that it can scale. Now you don't necessarily need kind of crazy people like me or designers and so on. You need a proper, boring engineer, somebody who can sit down and go, no, you can't do that because this is how the process works. If you want to create 10,000 of those, this is how it can be done. Questions? Okay, let's start. And I'm not kind of saying that engineers are boring. I'm just kind of saying there comes in innovation to stages where you can't just play around, where you have to kind of get serious about things and accept that it's a different thing building one fun prototype. You can see a couple in the background right now. And then starting producing en masse and producing at a global scale. And then the fourth level, when we talk about innovations, people think we just talk about fun stuff, fun little kind of gadgets we have, or fun kind of additions to our toy chests. But in fact, what we're talking about is really something that can be accepted by a market. And then people think I will only talk about commercialization. But for instance, you can create the most fantastic social innovation, something that might help single mothers in rural India, for instance, which is, of course, something that we really should focus more on rather than creating toys for kind of fat white people like me. But then too, we have to understand that this is a market. We need to find a way to communicate with those single mothers in rural India to make them understand the product and accept the service innovation we have. And that can take completely different skill sets than, for instance, ideation or prototyping or scaling. That might take cultural skill sets, communication skill sets, and so on. So when I have talked to kind of companies, I say there is no innovator. There is no single person who can understand all these things. I mean, sometimes you look to people like Steve Jobs and the likes who actually managed to capture quite a lot of it. But I say, no, we need so many complex and different skill sets, and we need to be respectful to all of them. So want to become a better innovator? Start respecting every skill set in your company. They're all needed to realize those thousands of ideas that are already there. So that's my very brief kind of reply to it, because the problem I often see in companies is that people think innovation is this one thing. It's a one process, one kind of management kind of Lego brick you put in, a module. But no, it is a complex, interrelated kind of conversation between different skill sets, at least if you want your innovation to be successful.
Right. I really like how you kind of put this in a framework of how, innovation can really be identified, processed, and then, taken care of. You briefly touched upon how brands can identify, these innovators, these concepts that, by respecting, of course, all the functions that we have. Can you also touch deeply on how brands can actually identify these new problems and what exactly should, the parameters be to whether, go ahead with this, or just because the market is doing this, I should do this, or because my competitors are doing this, I should do this as well. So what do you have to say to these brands here?
I think it's very important to remember there is this old theorist called James March, called Jim March, who very early on, sometimes in the 80s, as I recall, wrote this very, very influential paper in which he said we have to have both exploration and exploitation. And by exploitation, he didn't mean that we need to be nasty and start exploiting people, but he meant that for any company, you obviously have your existing customers. And it would be very stupid to kind of go, okay, we have these customers, now we can ignore them. You, of course, need to continue creating what you already have done for these customers, maybe with some incremental improvements and innovations, but that needs always to be at top of mind of companies, that they shouldn't let innovation, what's more the explorative thing, become a kind of become something that you're forced to do, become something that you're kind of doing in a chaotic manner. We have to innovate because everyone else does. No, you have to start by keep serving your existing positive cash flow bringing customers. It might sound boring, but sometimes boring is good. But you also need exploration. And I bring in Jim March because I like his word, exploration. It's not just about what are our competitors doing. No, it's about going a bit crazy. It's about allowing a small group in your organization to really go to places which might be super surprising, which might not fit in with the kind of normal way in which we work, and look and see, is there something here we could do? Is there, in this completely irrational or wild and bizarre place, is there something that we truly could bring out? I have a really nice company I used to work with, a German company. They work with cleaning chemicals, not the most exciting business in the world. They clean out brewery pipes and clean slaughterhouses, for instance. Important, but not very exciting. But they have a super smart CEO who traveled to a refugee camp in Africa and saw, because he was just interested in philanthropy, and made a travel to see a situation, and realized how many children were actually suffering because there was very little water. So they actually had to drink water out of basically the ground, out of puddles of water, often very dirty, very kind of dangerous water to drink, obviously creating things such as dysentery and other stomach ailments that could literally kill children. And he has this idea, but I actually know how to clean stuff. Clean stuff is what I do. I'm super good at cleaning. So he goes back to his people and says, listen, how cheaply can we make a pill that you can put it into a glass of water, and no matter what is in the water, except if it's pure poison, we can make it drinkable? And the company goes, of course we can. This is what we do. We clean water. We clean stuff. And they create this, and together with the UN, they create this fantastic way that is now used in refugee camps all over the planet, in which children can take this little pellet, put it into a glass of water, even if they literally took it out of a puddle moments ago, and know that this glass of water will not kill them. So you need to travel outside where you normally are. This German guy, he didn't stay just with his breweries or his slaughterhouses. He went to a refugee camp to get his idea. I've kind of taken CEOs to weird places and said, your job is not to kind of find, oh, how can I sell my same old stuff I always sold here? No, your job is try to understand, what is this place? What is this context? How can I try to move my head and shift my mindset so that I can understand the opportunities that lie here? And I mean, that's where I've often gotten some of my finest own ideas. I was part of the first science diplomacy mission that ran a startup camp in North Korea. I mean, startups in North Korea sounds impossible, but we actually ran something like this in Pyongyang. And I learned so much about how human innovation, human creativity can exist and even flourish, even in this completely kind of totalitarian dictatorship. So explore. Read magazines you've never read before, travel to countries you didn't know existed a week ago. This is how we kind of learn. If you're an urbanite, go into the rural areas. If you're from a rural area, spend some time in the center cities. Whatever it takes, keep your mind alive. I try every week to find something new to read about that I didn't know before. I've been reading about biology. I'm not interested in biology. I don't like biology, but I force myself to read it because that is the only way I can keep my mind fresh and keep my mind open to new ideas. It's not always easy. It's not even always nice, but it's something we need to do to push our minds outside of their current envelopes.
That is pretty amazing. It was really interesting to know how you yourself put yourself into different situations like these and actually try to, learn something new, or maybe unlearn that you already knew and maybe see a fresh perspective. That is really interesting. Well, my next question is, can you share with us a hack to help identify business ideas?
In a sense, I already shared it. In a sense, I think that the best way to find ways to get new business ideas is simply by studying things you haven't studied before. Yeah. I sometimes jokingly kind of talk about, I worked at one point with these 5 CEOs. We had a bit of a kind of mind meld, or whatever you want to call them, big brain group. They were all in the same industry, and they really acknowledged that their industry was getting conservative. They were all testing the same kinds of things. They wanted to find a way to differentiate, and I knew all of them, so I brought them together to kind of be able to kind of have an open discussion about this, not sharing any kind of secrets, of course, but to kind of have a chat about the challenge that all of them were struggling with. And then, as part of that, I kind of urged them to kind of list. It's a longer story how it all came to pass, but basically what I made them do was list what they read every week. And then I compared those lists. They read almost exactly the same things. They read the same business newspaper. They read the same business magazine. They read the same industry magazine, and they read the same industry reports. The only difference was some of them liked sailing and others liked golf. So that was basically the only difference. One of them happened to have read a detective novel. That was the only difference in their kind of input of ideas. And I said, this is your problem. Kind of, there is not enough input strangeness. If you all read the same magazines, the same reports, of course, you're going to look alike because you're going to think alike. You're going to have the same ideas brought to you. So I did something. I sent one of them, I ordered a ladies magazine for him, just to kind of mess with him a little because it was very macho. So I thought, I'm going to send him Cosmopolitan. And I said, you're going to read that every month. You're reading Cosmopolitan because you're going to find stuff there you had no idea about. Another guy sent him Scientific American. He had come more from a law background, so he wasn't really au fait with the kind of developments in technology and so on. So I sent them all kind of the kinds of magazines. I made them pay for them. I'm not that generous. And chatted with them a couple of months later. And all of them said, including the guy I sent Cosmopolitan to, said, yeah, I'm actually noticing it. I'm thinking differently and I'm asking different kinds of questions. And then they're going, is it really this easy? I said, well, it's easy now because you started from such a low level. You started from this. It's going to get harder because every step you take, you're going to need to challenge your brain even more. But right now, yeah, even reading Scientific American once a month can actually shift your mind. So we need just to find those hacks, that kind of things, and be it travel, be it magazines, be it books. Heck, it might even be music for some people. I'm not judging. I'm not saying that this is what you have to do, but you have to do something not to get stuck in your ways.
Correct. Well, you inspired me to go and read something that I would not like to read today itself. So I think not just for business ideas, I think for everyone out here, I feel if you just pick up a random magazine and just go through a couple of few pages, I'm sure it will change how you look at things, and it's actually going to, shift the way you, are putting opinions or making decisions, having ideas. And I think it is so interesting to know now that, internet sometimes can be really overwhelming about new topics coming up and all of that. But I mean, personally too, like talking to you and talking to other leaders, knowing about what is actually that you are doing different, that actually makes a difference, is something that I feel everyone should really pick up, not just business leaders or, even the interns. Maybe they're trying to crack a project they're doing. Maybe they're trying to, figure out something new to do in this social media marketing age of, trending things, and always trying to be on top of the algorithm. So thank you so much, Al. This really helps. This really helps at a personal level too.
I often say that it can be even easier than that. I have an acquaintance. I wouldn't call him a friend because we don't know each other that well. It's a friend of my partner's. He's not educated. He's intelligent. He is, and sometimes when I struggle with a really complex problem, I take him out for a beer or a coffee, and then I explain this thing. And I have to explain it in a fairly simple way because he doesn't know the kind of, if I say disruptive innovation, he has no idea what I'm talking about. So I have to explain it in different terms. And then he asks very different questions from what my professor buddies or my consultant friends ask. And every time I find that I walk away and I've learned something. Because when we talk to people who are not like us, who use different terms, who use, when we have to kind of change our language a little. So it doesn't even need to be a magazine or a book. You can go to a cafe, you can go to a street vendor, you can talk to the guy or gal sitting next to you at the bar and say, listen, if I tell you this, what would you ask me? We can learn so much simply by allowing people close to us, and not just those whom we already know, but different people, people from different backgrounds, a diverse set of kind of people to communicate with. It's actually quite easy when you think about it.
Yes, yes, definitely. Thank you so much, Alf. That brings us to the end of the interview. But do you have any other sound bites that you'd like to leave our audience with?
I'm not big on sound bites. I think that actually one of the problems with innovation is we make it too complicated. We turn it into something that people, only people with high degrees and lots of consultancy experience can play around with. I like talking about innovations with anyone, a child, a street vendor, a shoe salesman, a teacher. And I think that if we make innovation something a little less romanticized and kind of too glamorized, we can actually all become better people and better innovators.
Mm-hmm. Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for sharing with me some of your tricks that you do. I am personally going to go out and going to run a few of them. Thank you so much, Al, for giving us your time. It was super interesting.
You.
Loved your energy, loved the insights. We're hoping for another chat with you very soon. But thank you so much, Al. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
For more content, subscribe to Engati and tap the bell icon so you get access to exclusive content coming from thought leaders from around the globe. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you with a new expert soon.